Okay, today's lesson is on factoring when a is greater than 1. If you remember from our last lesson, we took the pattern for quadratics as this, and the a was equal to 1. Now today, and then we learned to factor. And today our a is going to be greater than 1, and so it'll add in a couple extra steps. Might be a little difficult, but if you follow the steps, you'll be fine. So just double checking the vocabulary. You remember that a factor is a verb, so see, it's an action word, meaning to write an expression as the product of its factors. Okay, leading coefficient again is the coefficient on the term with the highest power. So that's where we get the a, and where we're talking about a is greater than 1. And just a little note, this seems hard, but again, it just goes step by step. Ask questions, keep trying problems. You can't learn math if you don't do math. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to look at is this quadratic. Notice that the end terms are different, but the middle terms are alike. And so let's look at factoring by grouping would mean that you take the 4 terms and group them 2 and 2. Once you get them grouped, take out a greatest common factor. So of the first group, the greatest common factor is y, because you have 5 times y times y, and for negative 6y, you have negative 1 times 2 times 3 times y. And all they have in common is the y. So once you factor out the y, you have 5y left here minus 6. Okay, if you do the same over here, you could factor out a 2, and you would have 5y minus 6 left. Now you notice, I hope you notice, that this and this are now the greatest common factor. So put the greatest common factor down, and then once you get rid of that, all that's left is y plus 2, and now you factor by grouping. So, yay. In every problem, though, the grouping is not going to be done for you with the middle term. And so on this one, we're going to show you how to do a complete factoring with the middle term, where you have to break it apart into 2 pieces. So let's write down some steps. I think if you write them down and follow them, you should be much better off than if you didn't. So let's look at number 1. You will always look for a greatest common factor. The reason you do that is to make the number smaller to work with. Many times the problem will still work, but then you've got these gigantic numbers to work with instead of just smaller numbers. So if we look here, there is no greatest common factor, so we move to the next part. And then we're going to list factors of whatever a times c is. And a in this case is a 6, c is the negative 5. So 6 times negative 5 is negative 30. So let's list some factors of negative 30. Okay, and in it, remember, we've got something times something is negative 30. Notice it's different because it's not just the last term c, but it's a times c. And the same number plus the same number now is going to give you negative 7. So as we do factors of negative 30, we're keeping that in mind. And of course, we'll stop when we find one that is equal to negative 7. Okay, so negative 30 is, let's see, let me go back to my pen, negative 30 times 1 or 30 times negative 1. Neither one of those will get you a negative 7 when they add them, so keep moving. How about 10 times 3? So negative 10 times 3 or 3 times negative 10. And, ooh, right there. Because if you add 3 plus negative 10, you're going to get a negative 7. So double checking, 3 times negative 10 is negative 30. 3 times negative 10 is negative 7. So, yay. So now that we know that, then we are going to rewrite the middle in parts. Not very neat handwriting, but we'll get it. So this one now, we're going to, instead of saying negative 7x, we're going to go back to these factors and split it up. So we're going to keep the 6x squared, we're going to keep the negative 5, and then we're going to split the negative 7x into 2 parts. Okay, so I would put plus 3x minus 10x, because that's what I got when I factored it down. Alright, so now I have 2 parts, and I can do the factor by grouping like I did in the last slide. Okay, so I probably ought to do my number 4, which is factor by grouping. Grouping. Maybe I can fit it there. Okay, so now we're going to take out the greatest common factor. If I look in my first set, 6 is 2 times 3, so I would have a 3, and they both have x's, which would leave me with a 2x plus 1. I divide out the 3x from the 3x. I can't leave a 0, because when I multiply it back, it wouldn't be the same. So I put a 1 as a holder. Here it looks like I can take out a negative 2, and it would, or negative 5, sorry. Let's see if I can erase that without messing too much up. So negative 5, and that would leave me with a 2x plus 1, because I took out the negative 5. Now again, I look for my greatest common factor. My greatest common factor is 2x plus 1. When I get rid of those, all that's left is 3x minus 5, and that's my answer. Woohoo! Okay, let's try a little bit more difficult one. What do you think we should do first? If you forgot, look in your notes and see what is the first thing that you're going to look for. And I'll write it again, greatest common factor. Is there one? Kind of looks like maybe a 2. So if I can pull a 2 out, that would leave me with 18x squared minus 27x plus 4. So that seems to be better. For right now, we're not going to worry about the 2, but we're going to factor down the 18x squared minus 27x plus 4. So of course you know that we've got to go looking for when you multiply a times c. And here 18 times 4 is 72. So I'm going to be looking for possible factors of 72. So when I take 72 here, I want blank times blank to equal 72, and the same blank plus blank is going to give me a negative 27. And I can go through all of those because the negative the negative 27 means that you're going to have both negatives. So if you're looking at 72, it would be 72 times 1, or negative 1 times negative 72, because you have to end up with a positive 72 and a negative 27. So let's kind of see. So if I go through and do it for you, because it makes it faster this way, I found a negative 3 and a negative 24 that would work. So again, keep the first term, keep the last term, and split that middle into two parts. Now it doesn't really matter if you put the 3 first or the negative 24 first. Actually, they'll work out the same. So you have a negative 3x minus a 24x, and now you've got it to where you can factor by grouping. Okay, I probably forgot to keep writing all the rules. 27, group. My rules get shorter and shorter the more times I do it, so that hopefully by the end I'll be done and won't have to write any steps. So 3x looks like it's the greatest common factor here. If I take out a 3x, looks like I would leave with a 6x minus 1. Now I know on this next one, right there, that I want to end up with a 6x minus 1. So if I want to end up with a minus 1, I have a plus 4. So I'm going to have to take out a minus 4, because that would leave me with a 6x minus 1. And then again, my greatest common factor, 6x minus 1, left over 3x minus 4. And I'm finished. Let's do one more, see if we can get better and better at this, so at least you don't have tons of questions. Okay? So, what do we do first? Without writing anything down, look for a greatest common factor. Right, is it there? Of course not, because that's what we're trying. So then I'm going to start to multiply. I look for greatest common factor. Now I'm going to do a times c, which happens to be negative 270. Now that starts to get a little more difficult, like 1 times negative 270, 270 times negative 1, 3 times 90, 6 times 45, 9 times 30, but I need to remember that I have to add them together to get the 87a. So if I look, I think I'm going to do well with a negative 3 times a 90. Now, you may have to write out all the factors as you get going. Practicing more and more, you won't write out every factor. You'll try to do some in your head. But when you're beginning, you probably shouldn't be doing things in your head. Your teacher will get mad at you. So keep the first term, keep the last term, and split the middle term. Let's say I'm going to put the plus 90 here and the minus 3 there, because I can see that the minus 3 and the 10 wouldn't give me what I wanted. It makes it less easy to factor. Now we can factor by grouping, which looks like I can take out a 10a, which would leave me with an a plus 9. Again, now on this side I want to make sure I can get an a plus 9. So if I take out a negative 3, it would leave me with an a plus 9. Greatest common factor now, a plus 9, and the leftovers 10a minus 3. Now this type of factoring is difficult. You know, it's like if you try not to follow the instructions and try to do it in your head, you probably will have a rough time. So especially at the beginning, go step by step by step. Here's a couple of YouTube videos that might help you, but usually if you just ask your teacher, that's the best way.